Heart in Hand is delighted to be sponsored by the Rangers Youth Development Company. John Gregg, Richard Gough, Lorenzo Amoruso and Barry Ferguson, 4 legendary Rangers captains and the faces of Rangers Youth Development Corp's latest lotto campaign. Over 18s can play and weekly prizes are on offer, plus an end-of-the-month jackpot of at least £12,000 in 4-week months and £15,000 in 5-week months. Visit www.rydc.co.uk, that's rydc.co.uk now for full details on all their products, or click the link in the show description to sign up for Rangers Lotto. Hello everyone and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name is David Edgar and as always I am your host, and joining me this week to pick through the bones of a terribly disappointing afternoon at Ibrox is David Graham. Hello David.
David, good afternoon. Good afternoon listeners. Yes, this is very much a rotten carcass that we're going to have to try to chew on for the next half hour, 40 minutes.
Yes. To quote the great Blackadder series, I made a note in my diary last night. It simply said bugger, and I think that sort of sums up my mood upon returning home and upon waking after going down to Motherwell. Now listen, Davey, before we get into the match, I really don't want to sugarcoat this. I really don't want to ignore it's not an elephant in the room so much as a herd of elephants having a big party with their intention spelled out on the wall in large elephant letters, which is yesterday to win the league. It was vital to win the game. It was not good if we had drawn the game, but not a disaster. Losing the game would be a disaster, and that's what happened. And we have to be realistic and say it's put us really up against it in the final 4 matches.
Yeah, well, I think, and look, you can talk about Motherwell all you want in terms of how much they've improved and all the various things. Like certainly they're certainly the best Motherwell side I remember in a long time. But regardless of who the opposition is, we had to and have to and should have 1 or 2 home games in the split. And I would have said the exact same thing if it was flipped over and we were away to Fir Park and away to Easter Road, but home to the other side of Old Firm and Hearts, for example. So, like, yesterday was inexcusable. I think at any level, regardless if I'm watching my son's under-11 team or you're watching a Champions League final or a World Cup final, you cannot concede 2 goals at any level and expect to come back and win the game. It's not impossible, but to concede 2 goals so early at home was quite frankly criminal, and it raises in itself a huge question mark over the team and the team selection.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely did. Now, again, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I looked at the team and I thought, yeah, good, 2 up front, brilliant, let's get stuck in. And I felt we needed 2 up front after the last game. I was wrong, and that was apparent after 15, 20 minutes. What disappointed me there was that we didn't really change anything. And secondly, that the players didn't realise it and deviate that from themselves, which I think is increasingly a thing in football, not just at Rangers, but in general, that players can't react to what's happening on the pitch. They all seem to need to get in at half-time and get reset by the manager. Whereas yesterday, I think it's quite clear that what you need to, you look at that and you go, right, we've got to pull an extra body into the middle of the park here. Somebody needs to come in for 10 minutes and we need to stop them getting on the ball. And again, we have to wait till half-time. And of course, David, you nailed it there. That's the second game in a row where the managers had to make half-time changes. If you're having to do that every game, no matter how much it improves in the second half, it's because you didn't get the team selection right at the start.
Well, yeah, you can argue you didn't get the team selection right at the start, but like at any level, I play rugby to a reasonably good level, and regardless of how good our preparation being during the week, there will be times where a team who has played really well one Saturday will simply not turn up the next Saturday, and therefore, the coach will say at halftime, right, well, we're going to have to make changes. This isn't really working. Now, that can be dictated by a wide range of factors: the environment, the weather, the opposition, how they set up, etc. But it's, for me, as much exposes the kind of psychological weakness of the team that, like, I can only draw a conclusion of one or two things: that they were essentially overwhelmed by the atmosphere, and essentially that Ibrox was almost too loud and the shirt was too heavy, or and we'll maybe discuss the atmosphere pretty much in a second, but or they're either physically weak or they simply cannot motivate themselves to play in a game against Motherwell at home for whatever reason. And I suppose, speaking to someone fairly recently in terms of, it was a football agent actually, he said, it's really difficult to convince players to go to the Old Firm. And I said, oh, well, how come? You're playing big stadium like Ibrox, you're playing in front of a big crowd, you're playing in Old Firms, which are huge games, you have chance of playing Champions League football. And he said, yeah, but David, no one grows up and dreams of going to Livingston away and, Rugby Park on a cold, wet Wednesday night. And, like, in reality, this does, and I have already voiced this in our group, David, this does expose wider concerns that I have around the recruitment. And I think nothing summed it up. Like, let's be frank, at half time, we brought off Chukwueze at half time, wasn't that correct?
Yeah, we did, yeah.
So we brought Chukwueze off for Diamonde. So Chukwueze is a new signing who essentially we knew we needed to bring someone in to give us a fighting chance to win the league. So he's been taken off. We brought on Mikey Moore, who is granted an extremely talented future England international, but he's an 18-year-old boy who has played, in my opinion, far too much football for his physical profile this season. Which is not his fault. I think he's been our best player overall in the season, to be quite frank. And then we brought on Tav, who this week we spent the time, and we'll discuss Tav in a minute, where some people said, can't wait to get him out, and other people said, what a legend. But either way, we've had to bring it on at half time. So, yeah, it creates, in my view, wider issues that have been exposed, granted, particularly in that first 45 minutes, but they've been there well before the current owners, and in my view, they haven't really been improved since the new regime has come in, to be honest.
No, I would disagree with that. I think the squad is better now than it was in January. I think there were a lot of mistakes made last summer, but what is clear is that it's not the finished article yet. Also, there are days that the team plays badly. And that was, in that first half yesterday. And I think that sometimes we're very binary on this, which is if we win, great. If we don't, it's, we're rubbish and everything's terrible. And I can understand that, especially with 5 games left to go in the season, when you are expecting a certain level of performance and result, and we didn't get it yesterday. And that, understandably, is going to lead to us, questioning everything, which is, again, totally normal for a football fan. I just think that sometimes we can tend to either be very, one way or the other on it. For me, yesterday, there were a number of mistakes that were made. I think what it did highlight to me, David, is that I do have big concerns about the middle of the park because we don't have a passer. And when we play against a team who can pass the ball, and Motherwell can pass the ball, then we struggle, because you saw yesterday what happened. There are 2 things, I think, structurally that were wrong with the performance yesterday, and they come from the fact that none of the midfielders are comfortable on the ball. So when the ball goes out to them, or not as comfortable as you would want them to be on the ball, and not good enough passers, Raskin, Chukwueze, even the other ones that we've got, to say Barron, right? They all have their talents, but none of them, I would say, are what you would call that midfield playmaker, that general type, right? So they get the ball, and there's nowhere to go. And by the way, movement is another issue, so fair enough, right? That's a legit thing. But they don't have the confidence or ability, in some cases, to play the ball. We also utilise a style, which most modern teams do, where the goalkeeper's going to feature a lot, and our goalkeeper's kicking is not up to the standard to do that. His kicking is, at best, erratic, but you're asking someone to join in on play a lot who doesn't really have the ability to join in and play in those areas. So what it ends up is a bit of a mess where the ball goes back to one of the midfielders get the ball, they turn, there's nobody to hit, we end up playing it about the back, it goes back to the keeper, we then do it again, the crowd get frustrated, it goes back to the keeper, he kicks it long, and yesterday was one of those days where everything Butland was kicking was either going out for a throw or straight to a Motherwell player, and boom, they're on the attack again. And I think that spooked us. And you've got to come up with better solutions. And this is on the manager as well. You've got to come up with better solutions for that issue when it's staring you right in the face.
Yeah, well, Butland's distribution was particularly poor yesterday, certainly at times. Look, here we go again, the David Graham, Stephen Davis bingo. It's only taken me 10 minutes to mention him, but we've never replaced Stephen Davis. We know all that. We and obviously it was in many ways a generational talent, but you're right. It's having someone who is able to control the ball. And I sort of thought Asgard would be, well, in fact, actually, we all thought Joe Rothwell might well be the one, if you remember him. And you're right. I mean, Raskin, I don't want to be hard to say sort of what's the point of Nico Raskin, but I'm not quite sure Raskin knows his role in the team. I'm certainly not completely sure of it. And yeah, I think you're right. We were outplayed by Motherwell. It's as simple as that. And, for me, when you get chances, I mean, I don't think we threatened their keeper. Quite frankly, before our first goal, I don't remember us really threatening their keeper at all. And certainly there was, Moore has probably been the victim of an incredibly courageous block at the end, but Tremedi's got to score. I think Asgard's got to score. Yeah. And, ultimately, if you're in a situation where you're being exposed at the back, you can't get control in the middle, and your attacking players, strikers, are not taking chances, well, you don't have to be a tactical genius to work out things aren't going to end particularly well for you.
No, you don't. And I think that puts us up against it in a game like that. And there is a legitimate question. We say, well, why do Motherwell play better football than us? And they do, right? There is no doubt about that. You could then counter that argument with, yeah, but Rangers are clearly more successful doing it. We're ahead in the league, right? Which is true. Our method clearly works better than theirs in that regard. But then that's ignoring the context of Rangers spend more money, have on paper better players than Motherwell. And I think that, to me, yesterday, Rangers looked out coached. Now, Danny Rowe would not like to hear that, I'm sure. It was brought up in the press conference and he wasn't all that keen on it. Which is why I think the whole, they were away in Spain, what were they doing, was, overplayed. Understandable that the people will focus in on it. But to me, it wouldn't have mattered if they'd been at Ibrox last week, right? Or the week before. It's what you are up against and what you're doing on the pitch. In Motherwell, we're very comfortable playing in triangles, hunting in packs, making boxes around our midfielders, and our midfielders didn't respond well enough. They were consistently hunted down with the ball, and that is something that really needs to be eradicated. That our team can play with that level of confidence and ability on the ball. And again, it is different at Rangers because you need to win every week, regardless of whether the team's in form or not. At Motherwell, you don't. You can have periods where you don't win matches, right? So it's a different type of pressure. And we've seen a lot of good SPFL players step up to Rangers and shrivel under the weight of the shirt, as you put it. But yesterday was really glaring. The thing that really hurt and annoyed and angered me yesterday was I felt we were outworked. And that, I think, is very difficult. Even if you're not playing well, you've got to find solutions, which was yesterday. We've got two up top. Let's go long and play off them. Let's make sure we get the second ball. Let's do something different. Instead, we kept doing the same things in the first half and they kept not working, and yet we kept doing them. I find that tough to take.
Yeah, do you know what actually worried me as well early on was, so I don't know, so on the pre-match atmosphere, I loved the flags and the banners. It was a really nice day. And there clearly was like a really good atmosphere. Some of the videos are brilliant. The tifo again from the Union Bears was fantastic. And I'm sure we'll discuss the UB in due course on this pod. But if I can play devil's advocate for a second here, Davey, listeners, do you reckon it was all a bit over the top for Motherwell at home? Is it almost this thing now where have we?
No, I'm sorry. I'm just going to batter into that right away. No, there was a great atmosphere for a title team going for a title. We cannot sit and complain about this to me is blaming the supporters for creating an atmosphere when we blame supporters for not creating an atmosphere.
Yeah.
The sun was out. We're 5 games for a title. That was the atmosphere that it should have been, and the players should have tapped into it.
Yeah, no, I think. Listen, I agree with that, and I think I'm probably only just kind of throwing that out there for the chat on the pod. I think that the challenge is, as I said, and I'm repeating myself now, the players have either, in layman's terms, shot it because they're like, geez, we weren't really expecting this. This is a huge atmosphere, but I recall some brilliant atmospheres before. European nights there, particularly in the run up to Seville. I remember us turning off the music so the fans would sing. You really feel the whole stadium, and it just felt yesterday that you're right about even the first 10 minutes. I was like, we're not on them the way we're not feeding off the crowd here, and that was the sort of concern. The first 10 minutes felt really long, and it was probably not a good sign. I was like,
that's on them.
Yeah, 100%, and
that's on them. This is an ongoing thing, because the other thing about the atmosphere yesterday was it wasn't that they turned it into a highly pressurised game or anything like that. It was a positive, upbeat atmosphere. Everyone was in good spirits. People were singing songs, and
even a 2-0, I thought.
Yeah, the fans were great. So
yeah,
no, I've seen some people mention this and say, "Oh, was it a bit much for Motherwell at home?" No, of course it fucking wasn't. And there'll be the same people that are coming out and saying, "Ibrox is like a morgue. Why can't we get behind the team?" So
Subway loyal, all the usual.
Yeah. So you can't have it both ways. And again, this is what I mean about the binary thing and the scattergun approach. That either everything is great or everything is pish.
Yeah.
I think that ignores a lot of vital context. And in this instance here, what happened was the fans created a great atmosphere. We had a real opportunity to go out, win the game, do well. Motherwell played really well, right? And sometimes we almost go on as if there's no agency for the other side in the game. They played really well. And our players looked surprised by that, which, again, why? Because you've played Motherwell 4 times this season and they've been very good against you in all 3 of them. So there should have been that knowledge. And the pace at which they approach the game. This is a long-standing issue with Rangers, particularly at home. We slowly like to kind of just dip our toe in the pool and get into the game in bits and bobs and build up to it. And it so often... It comes back to bite us in the arse in one of 2 ways, which one, we concede and then we're up against it, or 2, we allow a team who don't have much ambition to settle in and defend, and then it becomes hard to break down and things become more and more difficult. Rangers players started that game at the wrong tempo, a tempo
Correct.
That Motherwell were not playing at. They were playing at a considerably higher one. And then it was only in the second half, 2-0 down, that the team reacted and went for it. But this is a failing of this side, that it's far too often a reactive team. We saw it at Falkirk, and again, there were other factors involved in that, the wind and whatnot, that benefited both the teams in one half each. But yesterday it was a case of they looked sharper, they looked more prepared to run and do the stuff they were supposed to do. And there was a sort of collective of the Rangers players, I thought, yesterday, sort of looking at each other and going, what's going on here? So whether or not that was attitude, because I was not surprised by how Motherwell played, and I would be incredibly disappointed how, if any of the players said they were surprised that they came out. The other thing about it is this, they were so intense, they hadn't been like that in the last few games. I don't care. It's Ibrox. It's a massive game for these guys. They know that people are watching them. There'll be a few of them that are eyeing up moves in the summer. It's a free hit for them. There's nothing to lose. If they lose, who cares, right? It's Motherwell at Ibrox. Everyone expects that. And if they win, then brilliant. So you've got to be ready for all of those things. And Rangers didn't look it. And by the time that they actually were, it's 2-0. And suddenly you're in a game. And it was, to me, something that I've seen far too often from this Rangers team, that they are passive right up until something goes wrong and then they react. They've got to be in the habit of seizing the opportunity. And maybe that's a bigger point overall in terms of league titles.
look, again, Davey, this is a wider macro point reflecting on the season and the wider club and direction that we're going in. You can hypothecate on the sort of the fallout from finishing first, second, or third. But if you go back to probably 2021, 21, 22, whenever the last time we had like any level of success, okay, so whether that was winning the league in the style we did for 55, whether it was, for example, the road to Seville, winning the Scottish Cup, we probably had like a core of British players there. Now that's not to say this isn't, sign people because they get it. But I mean, people like, Aribo, Bassi, Kamara were all, brought up British players in a certain culture and environment, as was Roof Defoe, Davis, Orfield, McGregor, Goldson, Tav. You know, the names now in terms of leaders and characters, I just don't know who they are in the team at the moment. And maybe I can speak more, in detail about the previous group I mentioned because I work with them. But, I'm not looking at our team now and looking like, even like when we conceded with a goal coming off Fernandez, like a lot of the players look around, it just looked a bit lost. It was just a team devoid of sort of leadership, maybe a sense of courage, a sense of character. And that surely has to be down to all the various processes that you go through when you're recruiting players. Because, for me, whoever looked at Gassama and thought, yeah, here, see when the chips are down, that's a boy that'll pick us out. Like, God forgive me, like, but there's not much heart in that lad, and plenty more like him,
I think guys like that are, if you like, they're your foot soldiers. You can't have a team of 11 generals, right? And guys like Gassama would be fine if they had those guys around them. The problem is, and has been for a number of seasons at Rangers, that we don't have any generals. So you've got lots of, if you like, a lot of privates and no sergeants. And I think a team needs
a lot of
that.
sheep and no shepherds, David.
Yeah. You have a lot of guys who, as you say, we're asking to provide leadership who need it themselves, and that is an issue. And yesterday, when they got it back to 2 each, it's fundamental at that point that you go, right, okay, we're going to try and win this, but if we're not winning it, we are certainly not losing it. And there are technical things as well, by the way. We're talking about, these are factors. I'm a great believer, things like heart and mentality and character, they are factors. But yesterday they were technical, footballing reasons. If you look at, we might as well start on that, you look at the first goal that Rangers concede. At the game, it just looked so simple to me. Motherwell were playing nice little 1-2s, gives and goes. And then you look at the Rangers team when I watched it back, they're bursting a gut to get forward. Rangers have 2 or 3 players that are jogging back, leaving it to other, expecting others to pick them up. Then when the shot comes in, Butland should save it. I don't really know what he's doing, what his attempt was, what he was thinking with it, because he should be, I think, making a fairly comfortable save. But it comes down to the fact that players were not doing their jobs well enough. And that there is a difference, I think, between a big glaring mistake, that when you pass the ball to an attacker and he runs in and scores, right? Everybody knows that. It's a huge error. We can all see it. But you can make lots of little mistakes. You've got Raskin just jogging back when he should be breaking his neck to get in there. You've got Asgard just jogging back when he should be breaking his neck to get in there. And you've got Motherwell players who are, in that instance, doing their job, doing the basic, and are probably surprised at the room that gives them. So it's not a catastrophic mistake, as in, he's just, a visible one that you could see from the moon. It's one of those, a group of players, 3 or 4 players are not doing their job correctly. Second goal, the midfield aren't tight enough again. Motherwell are able to play through easily. Dujon Sterling goes missing at the back post and the full-back gets in for a finish. The third one, they're on transition. Players aren't where they need to be. They're not switched on to the possible danger, which is unforgivable, by the way, after 89 minutes. And you've already conceded goals in the transition. And these are the kind of errors that Rangers have in them. And they lead to a lot of goals. We've conceded 8 goals in our last 3 matches. That's not good enough. And it can't come from 8 wonder goals, right? You can occasionally, if somebody hits a 30-yarder, and there's not much you can do about it. But it comes from people not doing their jobs in key moments. And that, I think, is what really, really annoys you, because you've got to be making sure that yeah, you're there. You're where you're supposed to be. That if you sense a bit of danger, you go and close it down. And Rangers yesterday had no particular sense of danger. The other thing that has been mentioned, and it is legit, is that Motherwell didn't have many chances, right? Which they didn't. But to me, that just makes it worse, because what that is that, well, when Rangers were doing their jobs, Motherwell didn't create much. But when Rangers switched off, which we did on a few occasions, it led to Motherwell goals. So for me, it's actually worse when the goals are preventable.
Well, Davey, I think that, several points you raise are very valid. Like, at any level of football, like I recall the general viewpoint when Northern Ireland went away to Germany. The general view was, look, Germany are much better than us. So therefore, see if they're going to score. Same as like when we were away in Italy. See if they're going to score. It has to be a moment of magic, brilliance, where you almost hold your hands up and go, all right, fair enough. Don't gift them anything. And in Germany, first goal, Northern Ireland, gifted Germany. Had to try to fight their way back in the game. So at any level of football, it doesn't matter if it's Sunday League or the World Cup final, a goal will be scored in any sport, football, rugby, hockey, whatever the case may be, by one of two things. Either a moment of magic / technical brilliance, where actually you go, that guy was better than him, he outfoxed him, and he scored. Or from someone's mistake, where someone makes a mistake, a slip up, and the other side take advantage of it. And that, in a way, you sum the whole, if we say nothing else in the podcast but that previous line for you, Davey, which is essentially Motherwell have very few chances. Argue they only really had 3, and guess what? They took all 3, and that's probably in many ways what is the kick in the teeth, because I can think of at least 3 occasions where 3 different players had literally the goal mouth at their mercy, and for whatever reason didn't score. That is on us.
Yeah, it is. And as are the Motherwell goals, because, as I say, if people are where they're supposed to be, they're doing their jobs. Switching off, we talk about it a lot in Europe, right? And we don't so much in Scotland, where we go, if you switch off for a moment at this level, you'll be in trouble. I think it's true about professional football. And it's tough to stay switched on 90 minutes, week in, week out. But that's what separates the top players, the teams that win titles, from the others. As does, in all fairness, you're right, finishing. But Rangers shouldn't need to be scoring 4 goals to win football matches every week. Something is going wrong there. Something is wrong, and possibly it's structurally. I don't think it's controversial to say that so far Danny Rule has not found the perfect blend. When he first arrived, we were keeping a lot of clean sheets, but our attacking wasn't up to much. And clearly he had decided, right, this team's poor. I need to, make us tough to beat initially. And that was understandable given the start we'd had. Then he's went to say, right, we need to be a bit more expansive. We need to go and score more goals. But then we've started leaking them as well. And it is obviously about reaching that perfect balance. Now, I think that, as I've mentioned, Rangers will certainly need to make some changes in the middle of the park next season. I think that, for me, the role that we asked Raskin to do isn't one he can do. He does have his qualities, but yesterday, for example, his passing was really poor, and that's not the first time that we've said that. His passing is at best hit or miss. He is capable of playing some beauties, but a lot of times, just simple passes, they'll go astray, and that's what was happening yesterday. And then when it does, you can see him get frustrated, and he starts herring into tackles and being places, where he maybe shouldn't be. And we saw that yesterday.
Sorry, apologies. Correct me if I'm wrong. Was Raskin not essentially the Ryan Jack replacement in reality?
Yeah, what I would have thought. But
yeah,
I think Jack was a better user of the ball.
Yeah,
to be honest.
But I think in a way where Ryan Jack's strength was his aggression, in the middle of the park, his ability to really close down players, but he was also aggressive driving forward with the ball. He scored some really important goals, and I think he was much more efficient with the ball. So what I'm almost saying here is that, like, we're kind of trying to ask Raskin to almost do, more of almost what that Stephen Davis type role was, when in reality, I would have thought Asgard was probably in that mould. And again, I hate using this cliche, but we've probably a bit of an identity crisis amongst a lot of our players, because we don't know quite what they're meant to do, and quite frankly, I don't think a lot of them know themselves.
I think with what Daniel's tried to do is he's tried to, cover as many deficiencies within the squad as he can by, if you like, almost asking players to. It's almost a wee bit like slightly square pegs into slightly smaller square holes. They don't quite fit, but you can probably get away with it. You can jam it in a little bit, and that again will only carry you so far. Eventually, you're going to, there will come days where it happens, and yesterday was very much one of them. Half time, make the changes, and as I say, if you need to make 3 subs at half time, and we needed 2, then the manager has got to carry the can for selecting the wrong team. Again, cards on the table. I didn't think before it he picked the wrong game, so neither did he, obviously. So I suppose I can't be too critical there, but equally, I don't get paid to pick the team, right enough. But anyway, so we then go into the second half, and there is an improvement almost straight away. We get the goal back with a nice bit of football, and this frustrates the shit out of me about this Rangers team. 2 things that they do. 1, they take more risks with the ball at the back than they do in the final third. And 2, when they do occasionally do it, like we saw yesterday in the second half and 3 or 4 other bits of play, they're quite good at it. And they create chances. And there was just some lovely 1-2, give and go, quick movements, players making overlaps, players making the runs, and it ends with your matey finishing. And, it's like, guys, do that. It's just, you can do it. And that just raises the tension.
Yeah. I just think that for me, look, there's a wider point, Davey, right? As you say, belief, hope, faith are all words which in reality you have to, that is an emotion based really on your gut. So for me yesterday, did I think we could get back in the game from 2-0? Yes, I did. At 2-2, did I think I'd win the game? Yes, I did. Because I have seen enough moments that in my view probably aren't, what's the word? We probably haven't done enough, if we're honest, to win the league under normal circumstances. But we've shown glimpses where, at least at times, we can see that there certainly are there's credibility amongst the squad. And I think for me, like, the manager has definitely improved us. Whether or not with a full pre-season under his belt, can we be in a similar situation next year statistically will remain to be seen. But I think that the point is there, David, like, certainly after that first goal, there was a feeling of momentum. There is certainly quality in the side. It's just being able to put it together consistently from 1 to 11 is really just where it's been lacking in reality.
Yeah, I think consistency is the key word here with this Rangers team, because we see it across so many. Yesterday's, I think, an almost brutally perfect microcosm of this Rangers team's flaws and strength. That, as I say, that there are times that they dawdle. There are times that they don't play on the right tempo. They are reactive. These are all negatives. But then they react. They play some nice football. They gain the upper hand in the game. They start creating chances. There's an energy about them. But they're very frustrating because you get bits a lot, bits of good things, bits of bad things. And when you're doing that, it's quite a tight gamble, because what you're hoping is most days the good outweighs the bad. And okay, for Rangers, mostly the good outweighs the bad, but occasionally it doesn't, and you get a result like yesterday. And to then get back in to 2 each, and as you say, 20 minutes to go, all the momentum. There are 2 things the players need to be saying. Let's go and get this winner, but let's keep it tight. Let's be aware for the sucker punch. We know that they've got a bit about them. They've shown it today. Let's be careful here. Let's make sure we're going forward and we're getting the right stuff. The manager sends on Barron for the last 5 minutes rather than an attacker. At that point, Davey, you have to, at minimum, get the point. You cannot then lose the game. And you may face criticism for well, you should have put an attacker on and won the game, right, as a manager. Yep. But what you absolutely cannot then do is surrender the point that you've got.
No. And I think like that was, see, to be honest, right, this is where I feel a degree of sympathy for the manager, because there could be no worse feeling as a football manager than looking round at your bench and basically going, not much option here, is there? And that's probably where like we probably lack, again, from Northern Ireland, here we go, but someone like a Kyle Lafferty that we were throwing on for like the last 20 minutes. He started a lot of games as well, but someone that you knew could come on in the likes of an Old Firm when, the game was getting broken up, who was able to cause all sorts of mischief and chaos up in the final third. We just don't really have anyone like that. And I mean, there was one point where like, Tremedy was rolling around the floor when I'm almost sure it was 3-2. And I'm thinking like, unless you're dead, fucking get up.
Yeah. I remember the point, yeah.
And that is really where I hadn't really thought about it until sort of about 4 o'clock this morning when I was lying awake, and I was thinking like, he's brought Barron on there because he's just thought, right, shut up shop and let's, just, not lose. But then in the same sentence, we've thrown absolutely everybody forward.
Yes, exactly. That's
so it's like, so we're
cognitive dissonance. Yeah,
correct.
Yeah, no, totally. We're doing two things that look diametrically opposed, and what happens in situations where that creates confusion, and in the confusion, Motherwell got forward and scored the goal. And yeah, look, there is absolutely no point pretending otherwise. This was a disastrous result, and the simple reason that what it does, that late goal, is it removes it from our own hands. We are now reliant on favours over and above what we do. We can win the last 4 games and not win the title. That's the reality of it. And while I think we've been saying all season on here, and a lot of listeners have been saying it too, there will be twists and turns, cliche alert, but there have been, for all the teams. There's been weekends that they've had good weekends and weekends that have had bad weekends. I think the really painful thing about this is that while I thought there may well, of course, be that I didn't see it coming in a home game. When you're going for a title, I mean, come on, you have absolutely got to be winning the home games. And there wasn't a lot of wriggle room left, but yesterday just ended any for Rangers. It's Tynecastle or bust next week. It really is that simple. Don't win that game, and I think it's good night.
I think like it was my view that whoever won all 5 games in the split will win the league, because statistically that was the case. We have to win at Tynecastle to even keep ourselves alive. Not only that, but I'll tell you what my wider fear is here, folks. And it's unbelievable how a matter of a few weeks can make a difference. If we thought the atmosphere was so good before the game yesterday, imagine what it would be like, against Hibs if there's nothing left to play for. I mean, you're talking about the diametrically opposed, total polar opposite. And I think in a way, Tynecastle, we need to win, yes, to keep the league's title, also keep the season alive, because I honestly, and I hate to be like the, glass half empty, but see if we lose at Tynecastle, I would absolutely be dreading going to Parkhead, because I just think when the going has got tough and there's been pressurised situations, whether it was Livingston away a few weeks ago, where again you're expecting to win, yesterday when again you're expecting to win, we've fallen short, and it just, maybe we've seen this movie one too many times, but we left going to Tynecastle before Christmas with, a big expectation, really looking forward to thinking, right, we've turned a bit of a corner here, and then, well, we know what happened that day, and I just think as well, for me, Tynecastle is absolutely not just the biggest game of the season, but it's the biggest game in a number of years, if we're quite honest.
Oh, yeah, look, absolutely. And if we win that, the next game is the biggest game in a number of seasons. That's the reality of a title race. But, yeah, they now know, I mean, it's a fairly simple sum that Rangers need to do. You need the 3 points there. You've got to win that, and then we'll move on to the next one and see what comes of that. But I wonder if there's something in that phrase that you just used there, though, Davey. Games that we're expecting to win. because I do wonder if sometimes the lethargic starts are because we have drop points in matches where you think we're going to go and win this. And it's almost like sometimes the players are waiting for it to happen rather than going and making it happen. And again, we have to go down before we get that reaction when they go, oh shit, right, need to get the finger out. And there's an element of, if you almost like panic, that acts as a spark. And it shouldn't need that.
Well, is there almost, dare I say, an arrogance, an expectation where it's, well, yeah, we're at home, we're Rangers, they're Motherwell, we'll win that. And I think in a way, look, not to sound like we're all in the sort of slow death march here, but Leicester did win the league 10 years ago, and they're now relegated to League One. Let's not make no mistake about how quickly things can change, both for the good and for the bad. And I think in a way, if one thing will have heartened other clubs within the league this year is, the Old Firm are not infallible. Probably the greatest frustration of this entire season for us is that the other side of the Old Firm have been absolutely awful and have been very much there for the taking. Thus our frustration. But yeah, it's all about a mindset, and that's what I said. I've said now for the third time in the podcast. Either essentially they were overwhelmed and anxiety and nerves got the better of them, or for whatever reason they think, yeah, well, I just need to turn up and everything's going to happen for us. But either way, that's on them. That's on the mindset, and that's why there are question marks over, going to the likes of Tynecastle, and especially Parkhead. Can they get up and again put in a performance like we did last season at Parkhead in around March, April, and before the split, I think, and then also the same one in December, January this year. But in amongst that, there've been some disappointing results as well.
No, 100%. And I mean, this Rangers team, as I say, it's a curious and frustrating mix of good things and bad things. And that, obviously, you hope that gets eradicated through good business this summer and moving on. Now, if the listeners' group chats are anything like ours or anything like social media, then after every defeat, never mind a big, huge one like yesterday, chat turns to the future of the manager. That basically, barring an absolutely catastrophic last 4 games, which could happen, of course, which is why I think discussions like this are always a little premature, that he'll be there next summer. I think that when he came in, the board would have given him a tack that was basically get us back, competitive winning games again, and we'll build from there. And he has done that, as frustrating as it is to then get to the next stage. My view on Danny Rule is that he's done okay. He's done all right. Bit better than average, not as good as we'd hoped. And that I think you can make the case based on your own gut feeling, if that makes sense. I think that what you can do is you can either say, no, he should go, and then you can find the evidence that backs that up, or you should say, no, he should definitely stay, and you can find evidence for that. Personally, I think that the club wouldn't have really any intentions of making a change there. I don't get that vibe at all. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, we could win the league and then people will look back in this show and laugh that we were even discussing it. But the reality is that people are discussing it today.
My view is that given what Danny Rule inherited, he's actually done a very good job. I think he's inherited who were at times both physically and mentally and weak. I think that if I'm honest with you, the recruitment had been so poor in the lead up to him arriving that he really had to be given a certain degree of flexibility. We've recruited well overall in January, in theory, to the point where Nadiri and Romans are now almost like missing key players, even though they're only in the door. Scott Olsen clearly hasn't worked out for whatever reason. The jury's out in Chikwane. But, from Danny Rowe's point of view, let's not mistake, and this isn't being disrespectful to him, Russell Martin beat Danny Rowe to the job last summer. From all intents and purposes, what we've all heard, it was Muscat and Jared, and essentially Danny Rowe had to almost execute himself in the position. to the role, the recruitment, almost sort of to keep his own credibility. So, we can't expect to have the finished article, because in reality, like, we're not going to be in the position to get the finished article. He's probably still struggling to an extent with the transition from coach to manager. But certainly overall, I think we have no choice but to give him more time. What I am concerned about is, if you put a gun to my head, can I see us being in that sort of Halloween annual change in the manager? Yes, I can, and that's not even a negative in Danny Role. I just don't think as a club we are where we need to be in terms of the recruitment, in terms of the whole, football operations. We haven't even mentioned the academy, in which, we're producing, from what I see, virtually nothing out of that. So in a way, is the manager of a football club always the one who has a target in his back? Yes, for obvious reasons, and that's fine. But in the same sentence, there are other issues that we need to solve and sort as well, not just simply the manager.
No, I totally agree with that. I think that, increasingly in modern football, part of a manager's job is to be that target that you mentioned, to be the guy who can be sacked, because as we've said before, you can't sack the owners and you can't sack the players. So it's almost like part of the manager's role is taking on the understanding is, if we need a sacrificial lamb, then you're going to be the guy. And don't get me wrong, they get very well remunerated for it. So I don't feel a lot of sympathy. But, Chelsea's a great example, isn't it? They get rid of managers left, right and centre when the club is total basket case. And that, I think, yeah. And we as supporters, we want the idea of the man, the guy who comes in and he just fixes everything and everything's okay. I don't think it's an unreasonable thing to think that Danny Rule might be better again next season, might have learned, when he sits down in the summer, from the experience of doing it, might get better players in and Rangers keep going. But nor am I naive enough to think that if we're here this time next year and it looks as though we're not going to win the league, that we'll be having exactly the same conversations, because the bottom line is, and as I say, we can all dress it up the way we want and look for, points to prove our point and ignore others that disprove it. If Rangers don't win the league, then we're all upset and angry, and we want to make sure the following year we do. And that's just the job, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think what I would also add to that is that I suppose the only, and this is I don't want to sound unfair in Danny Rule, but and I know that we have been brought up on a diet of Souness, Smith, even Advocat, McLeish, Smith again, Gerrard, even, and I'm not putting Philip Clement in the same bracket of success, but in terms of the type of manager, a sort of proper man, someone who was on the field, was a warrior, was a battler that we could all get behind emotionally, because he's one of us. Now, I'm not just saying let's just appoint someone who was a really aggressive centre midfielder who thumps the chest, etc., etc. There's a lot more to it than that, but I do have a degree of sympathy for Danny Role, because he's coming in, he's a young lad who, anyone that I've either heard about that has been coached by him speaks really highly of him. I know at Southampton he was really highly thought of down there. But I suppose when you're used to a certain profile of manager, it does then take a little bit of time to kind of adapt. And that's probably in a way where Gio, even though he played for us, even though he had, got the World Cup final with Holland, being such a successful player, his manner was probably to an extent too mild for a lot of fans, almost to the extent of everybody really liked him. He was clearly a really nice guy, but some fans sort of wanted to, rip your shirt off type thing, and that's on us as much as it is in Danny Rowe. But I think we need to be mindful of the context, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And anyway, these discussions will hopefully be stopped, because hopefully we'll go on a mad 4-game winning run and end up with the title. But if not, I'm sure we'll continue during the summer. Anyway, folks, that will do us for today here on Heart and Hand. If I can point you in the direction of our sponsors, the Rangers Youth Development Company, who do excellent work raising money for the future for Rangers. So please go and check them out at www.rydc.co.uk. My thanks to our producers, Mike Lee and Paul Miles, and my thanks to my guest today, the wonderful David Graham.
Thanks, Davey. Thanks, listeners. I've said this many times, but it is the most true of truest statements. The next game is the biggest game.
Yes, it most certainly is. It's Tynecastle or bust, folks. We'll be back after that game takes place. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Please check out our sponsors NordVPN for the best in online security. It's the best VPN on the market, and you can try it risk-free now with a 30-day money-back guarantee by visiting nordvpn.com/heartandhand. That's nordvpn.com/heartandhand, and it's risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee.